Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, you were live.
it only took a couple of days too, so.
We're live.
We're live. This is the Senate Education Committee, March 18th. Just a little brief discussion before we get to the work of the day. So let me just talk about the week. I've talked to most of you a little bit already, but we're perhaps going slightly out of order here. But just to lay out the week a little bit. I gave people the draft maps and the memo, and then I worked with Beth, St. James, with the council to turn that beginnings into the very beginnings of a piece of legislation. And so we're focusing first on governance and trying to be logical and sequential, because this whole thing on one hand is a big ball with 1,000 threads. And if we try to just think of it as a big ball with 1,000 threads, we're going to end up going nowhere. And so we're trying to think very logically, first let it to come second and begin to build down, even if we're thinking about all that. So our legislative council took a first stab on it based on discussions with me and the memos, plus the maps. And tomorrow we're going to do what arguably somebody could say we should have done first, and I won't deny that. Which is step back and think about our goals, what we're actually trying to achieve here, some of the big questions, and then identify some of the big questions, identify additional testimony we need, and those kinds of things. So, but just bear with me on this one, even though it's slightly out of order. Thursday, we're going to do, Beth will be back to talk about the three types of CTE governance, and then have Pip Devon coming in to talk about to give us a preliminary sort of an overview of the kinds of considerations that we might want to put in the bill about the way that the wards are drawn. In fact, some of it does not quite want to, some of it just have to, I suspect. And then we'll see from there. So that's kind of how I think that we're unfold. We're comfortable with that. Open to amendment if people have thoughts. But otherwise, so we did have the preliminary discussion about the memo on the maps. And so we're, I think, ready to just do a walkthrough. And there's by the way, there's so much of this is placeholder, tons of discussion that has to happen. This is just to get something on paper to spur the discussion. This walkthrough will help us do that. So with that, identify yourself for the record, and off we go.
Great, that's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. Would you like me to share my screen? I don't have to, it's just whatever the committee prefers.
Well, I guess if there are people watching it, let's make it easier for people watching.
Yeah, it's online if they want.
They can
But
pull it up.
it can be right in front of them too.
What do you want? I've got the hard copies.
It was very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
How's that? Bigger, smaller? Good.
Perfect.
So this is draft 2.1 of a committee bill. And as Chair Baumgart's said, and his kind of level setting of what we're about to walk through is, this is very much a draft. And in order to actually operationalize the school district and supervisory union membership that we're about to walk through, you would need to make a whole host of additional changes throughout Title 16 that are not in this draft. Additionally, I believe to facilitate conversation around how this would work, the sections around tuitioning are in this bill as current law with no changes except for to one statute. We'll walk through that when we get there. So again, just to remind everyone, if you see language that is underlined, it is new language that this draft is proposing to add. If you see language that is struck through, that is current law that the bill is proposing to strike. And if you see language that is neither underlined nor struck through, it is current law with no changes proposed. So where we are starting is Chapter 9, currently in Title 16 is the school district chapter. So what we're going to start with is we're going to repeal it all. And then we're going to build it back from the ground. Everything you would need to build back into this is not here.
So if I can just ask, with section, chapter 9, subsection 1, all these districts, which map is that related to?
Both.
Both maps. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Both of those maps, my understanding, are different ways to look at the whole. They both say the same thing with different level of detail.
Yeah, the second map, with the second map breaks down the sub-districts within the SUs. It doesn't change anything with the 6 large districts. It just breaks down the influence of the 3 SUs.
So what I have done is we're going to start our new chapter 9, our school district chapter, with you all chartering new school districts, creating new school districts. Lots of placeholder language here, right? Like school district number 1. That's a policy choice on what you end up calling these things. Something we haven't even talked about.
Do you want us to save our, the first question I wrote down is, do we need to name them? Because I feel like
Yeah,
we have.
Yeah. This is so much. This is placeholder for, you can just put a check next to it or something or underline it. Yes, we need to name.
We have to name them.
If we could have that do it, just accept it, but we also have to.
You also have in parentheses next to it. I believe I have remained faithful to the identification on the maps. So school district number 1 would correspond to what is on the maps, identified as Chittenden Central Supervisory District. So the kind of starting language here, the opening language for each of these school districts is going to be the same. It's school district, whatever, number, whatever, is and then we talk about how they provide education for their students. So it is an operating school district, meaning it is operating K through 12 schools for all of its resident students, and is formed of the member towns of. And what I did was I literally took the maps from your website and a map from a state of Vermont government website with a little bit more detail on town line. And I looked at them and I tried to make sure that where the lines on Senator Barngart's maps, they are lined up with the towns that I have apportioned here. So these represent no choices on my part. This is a representation, I believe, of all of the towns as they are apportioned on these maps. If I got it wrong, it was not intentional.
Is there any real distinction between an SU and a district when it really comes down to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
A supervisory union is made up of multiple school districts. A supervisory district is made up of one school
Is it
district.
have to be? Is that?
Under current law, yes. You can change things to whatever you want them to be.
The single district would perform the duties that the SU would otherwise perform across the smaller districts.
The way I've structured this is borrowing largely from our current law concepts and taking the maps and kind of applying our current law concepts to the maps. So if it's one school district, it's also a supervisory district. And there's a whole section in here about supervisory unions. We'll get there. If a supervisory union has multiple school districts, it is within its borders, then it's a supervisory union. In current law, the supervisory district board and the school board are essentially one and the same. And the supervisory union board with multiple member districts is made up of members of those school district boards sitting on their supervisory union board. Each board, whether it's a supervisory union board or a school district board, is going to be responsible for their different functions that are apportioned to them under state law. If it's the same people in the same body doing all of those functions, they're all doing all those functions. If there are two different bodies doing their two separate functions, then they're two separate bodies doing their two separate functions. That's how current law works. You don't have to keep current law. Do you want to talk about the membership of these school districts or just walk through them quickly?
I think, going into the membership probably is not a good use of our time right now. However, we will have senators and others in to test the underlying assumption here, and then people see something that doesn't, we all know our areas better. You know your areas better than I know them, and I know mine, but and so all this is going to need to get tested against.
Just a quick thing. I think as we start getting into that, and maybe you've already thought of this, but I do hope that we can get the Commission on the Future of Education and to discuss some of all of this, but also I think superintendents as well, because even though we may know our own districts, I think they're going to certainly be the ones who know a lot more than the nuances.
Yeah, and we're going to have we need to have all of that. In fact, tomorrow we can start identifying people who we need to have that right.
And these haven't changed since you last gave your thoughts on,
No, one
okay, how you made them.
change that I asked about to make was what town was it?
I don't remember.
Oh, was it Montgomery or
No, we
something?
realized that one town
Glover.
was a 7 through 9 choice. We had them lumped with a
I don't
9 through
remember.
12 or something like that, and we just fixed it. But we'll figure it out. But it's right in here and wrong on the map, and I'll figure that out.
Oh, yeah, I can go back to the first draft and figure it out easily, but not off the top of my head, unfortunately. Okay, so school district number 1 corresponds to Chittenden Central SD. And that is an operating school district. Also you'll see later, a supervisory district. School district 2 corresponds to Chittenden South SD, also an operating district. School district 3 corresponds to Western SD, also an operating district.
Can you go back up?
Mhm.
Huntington and Buicksburg. Okay.
I have not gone through
No, that's fine.
every town in Vermont and made sure they are represented here. I simply worked.
I was doing
mine. Yep.
This is almost by definition has a mistake or two.
Okay, that's
So we'll figure that out. By the way, let me just reiterate, I think that said it, but the 6 large districts are all fully operating. Just all clear as we go through.
The ones that are not.
Yeah, are on the second map. Yeah, they're the SUVs. The first 6 are all fully operating under this construct. They're not currently fully operating. But some of them that aren't fully operating do become fully operating under this construct, especially the islands, for instance.
If you continue to pursue this construct and continue to flesh out what needs to live in various places in Title 16, but especially in the school district chapter, the definition of operating and tuitioning and all of that would need to be built in here. It's not reflected here. I'm using these terms as we currently use them. School district number 4 corresponds to Central SD, and again, is an operating school district. School district 5 corresponds to Northern SD and is an operating district. And school district number 6 corresponds to Southeast SD and is also an operating school district. Those first 6 school districts represent the white parts on this map and the corresponding colored parts on this map. Starting on page 3, line 14, with school district 7, we're now getting into the colored portions of this map. And what you'll notice, hopefully, if I've done this correctly, and again, you'll need a lot more, like, you'll need me to do a lot more work. I'll own this. I'll need to do a lot more work to operationalize all of this. But what, starting on line 14, what we're getting into now are these supervisory unions, and within each supervisory union, the school districts that make up that supervisory union. So like colored towns are going to be merged together to create one school district.
So some of them will be non-contiguous because it is like structure with like structure. For instance,
So
operate K through 8, tuition 9 through 12. They would be together within each district. And
So-
they might not be contiguous.
So we're going to start with Southwest SU. We're going to start in the bottom left-hand corner. So school district number 7 is an operating district, and it is formed of the member towns of Pownell, Bennington, Woodford, Shaftesbury, Arlington, Clarendon, Shrewsbury, Tinmouth, and Wallingford. If you look at the February 26th map, those towns should be all of the pink ones in this Southeast SU. Is everyone following me?
Mhm.
Okay. So then moving on to school district number 8, we're in the same supervisory union. This is a non-operating school district. So it is not operating any grade, tuitioning all grades. It's formed of the member towns of Searsburg, Glastonbury, Somerset, Stratton, Sandgate, Winhall, and Ira. Those towns should correspond to the blue boxes, the blue towns in the Southwest SU.
Beth, and just to confirm, sorry, I was gonna have to join here. So the blue in the Southwest SU, that is one district,
Correct,
but it does not connect to the blue and the White
Correct.
River SU. Okay.
correct.
But just to add to that, you have the little, I can't even see what town it is. The little blue up here, part of that same district, even though they don't connect. Yeah.
So school district number 9, still in the same supervisory union, Southwest SU, is going to tuition grades 9 through 12. That everything you see in parentheses there is to help us walk through this bill. That's most likely not going to live like that forever. So school district 9 operates grades kindergarten through 8. Tuitions grades 9 through 12, and then is formed of those member towns. And those member towns are going to correspond to the dark green towns in the Southwest SU on the map.
And that's currently what's going on in those
In
towns.
those towns.
I would think. It's history.
And I should say, I have done no independent research on any of this. I have taken the map and plunked them in here. And I'm sure you all will hear testimony that will require some changes here or there. School district number 10, we are still in the Southwest SU. Instead of tuitioning grades 9 through 12, this school district tuitions grades 7 through 12. So it operates K through 6. Tuitions, bless you, grades 7 through 12, and corresponds to the light green towns. And then we've got one, this is the only school district 11 like this. School district 11, we're still in the same SU. It tuitions grades kindergarten through 6 and operates grades 7 through 12 and is formed of the village of North Bennington. I'm not sure that operates is accurate. I think this might be an elementary union school district, or it's not a union. This is an area to explore of how they actually operate, but I went off of the map. And that was all in the Southwest SU. Those were all individual school districts. Now we're going to move up to the White River SU. And again, school district 12 are the pink towns, and those are all operating towns or operating school districts that are being merged into one operating school district. School District 13, again, same, we're in White River SU, a non-operating district. Those are the blue towns. I'm on page 5 now. School District 14, we're still in the White River SU, tuitions 9 through 12. Those are the dark green. School District 15, we're still in White River SU. Tuitions grades 7 through 12. Those are the light green. Then we're moving to the last supervisory union, the Northeast SU. School District number 16 is the pink. It's the operating district. School District number 17, the non-operating district, is blue on the map. School District 18, tuition in grades 9 through 12 is the dark green. And then the last school district is School District 19, still in the Northeast SU. Oh, Northeast US. Yes, we are. Should be SU. Operates K through 6 and tuition 7 through 12. Again, that's the light green. So that hopefully accounts for the entire state for school districts. Again, in order to actually build this out to be operational, you're going to need, we're going to need to add a lot more detail. And it's not as, it may not be as simple as just saying School District 19 operates K through 6 and is formed of Peachum and Standard. I think we need to build that out a little bit more. Anything before I go on?
No.
Okay.
At least not for me. That's.
So we're still in the same chapter, our new chapter 9, our new school district chapter in Title 16. Subchapter 1 was all of the membership of the school districts. Subchapter 2 is governance. And if there was ever a place where you needed more detail, it is subchapter 2.
So could we, I'm not sure if you get this or not, but just so people know, these are interstate compacts. Towns in the white here. So we have 2 interstate compacts that we're just leaving alone.
And what's that mean?
They, it's like they have this may not be, so feel free to, but it's like they have a district that goes across the state line into, and that's done, I believe, by an act of Congress. Is that
Correct.
So, and from at least what we can tell so far, that seems to be working for them, and there's kind of noticed that. So we've left that.
They have their own chapters in Title 16 for those interstate school district compacts, and it does take an act of Congress to change them.
I'll just say this is jumping ahead a little bit, and so forgive me, but down at the very bottom of the state, Reedsboro and Stanford, and I mentioned this to Beth yesterday, I haven't figured out what to do about it, but they're, on the one hand, they're Benton County, but on the other, more importantly, the kids all go to school in Massachusetts, go to high school in Massachusetts. I say all, that's not true, a lot. Right, the majority go to across the border, and they've been doing that for 80 years.
To one particular high school.
CTE and high school, yeah, and that's where. So we have to figure that out. I just noted now we're all going to have something. It's Drury. Drury is the
I may be getting ahead of myself here.
Well,
I know I am.
just so it's your turn.
Just, I don't want to forget this question, but so these folks, Reedsboro and Stanford, who are going to out of state, was it private schools or public schools? That they're
I think it's public.
Public.
Yeah.
So they're okay. This
Yeah. Well, I that's one to get to later, but
Yeah.
I just noted. Okay. So
Okay, so we are now in our new subchapter 2 and chapter 9, school district governance. What I have done for the purposes of starting the conversation for you all and walking through this draft is done some pretty simple sections here describing the number of school board members on each school board and how their representation models. This is where I envision, it's not the end all be all, but this is where you would wanna, well, school district governance, I think, says it all. There's a lot more detail that needs to go in here. And I think it's a policy conversation for you all with your colleagues on whether some of this lives in Title 16, some of it lives in Title 17, which is the election title, or it spans both titles, all policy. But there would need to be a lot more here to actually operationalize these concepts. So with that said,
And I'll say one more thing just to add on before we get there. I just picked the number 9 for board members. That doesn't mean a thing because I just picked it as something. That's part of our discussion tomorrow. And then we want it to be, look, I had to put some number there, so that sounds good. That's it.
so a school district that is also a supervisory district. So that's going to be the white on this map. Shall be governed by a school board of 9 members elected by the voters of the district, apportioned in such a manner as to achieve substantially equal weighting of the votes of all voters in the school district and the choice of school board representation. This is where you get into the concept of wards.
So 6 large districts, 9 board members by ward. That's what's on the page.
The school boards for the smaller school districts that are located within the supervisory unions, so the colored portions on this map, have a different construct. So a school district that is a member of a supervisory union shall be governed by a school board of 5 members elected at large by the voters of the school district.
And I will say right now, I put that in there, but I actually think it's probably not right. We do not have that right. That's a placeholder. Because looking at some of these districts and the way that we're going to have to pick them through much more carefully.
Like both from the 5 and the at-large.
Yeah.
Perspective.
You'll notice that I'm starting each of these subchapters with a new series of numbers here. So subchapter 2 is starting with section 401. And then we're jumping to subchapter 3, school district powers and duties, starting with section 501. So you have lots of space here to create new laws and add detail, okay? This represents, it's all underlined because it was repealed when we repealed Title IX to start this draft. But this represents, you'll see over here highlighted in blue, this represents current law. And I put it in here to facilitate your conversation and orient you to what the some of the current law related to school districts. So powers of school boards, form of vote, this is all current law. And then I have put, this will need to be, so you, for example, this is where the ballot, for the warning for budgets for school district, I am on page 11.
Cruising around home.
So for example, because this is all current law. So for example, this is where language about school board budgets and the ballot language live. I imagine that you would want to make changes to this based on any changes you make to the financing system. But you can see here, right? Employ such persons as may be required to carry out the work of the school district, right? So these are really, this is where the school board and the school district is deriving its powers. You are granting it the authority to do certain things. So when you are ready, this will be an area for you to make sure you still like, right? And then we're going to jump right to, eventually, there's a lot here, powers of the electorate. So in current law, school boards have certain powers, and then the voters have certain powers. Again, this is all current law taken from section 562 of Title 16. An area ripe for policy decisions, whether that policy decision is to keep everything exactly the same or make some adjustments. And depending on your finance formula and some other policy choices you may or may not make, you may have to adjust the powers of the board or the electorate accordingly. So that's it. So we are out of chapter 9 now. We are going to go into a piece of current law. So I'm on the very bottom of page 17, moving on to page 18. Supervisory unions. So current law, chapter 7 is supervisory unions. You'll see this language is neither underlined nor struck through. Currently, you'll see on page 18, current law says the state board creates supervisory union boundaries. This draft is taking that power or duty away from the state board and saying that the General Assembly now sets supervisory union boundaries. And we're repealing language about the voters being able to go to the school board and say, or the state board and say, hey, we think you should adjust our supervisory union boundaries.
Just for discussion later, it's not impossible we could develop a construct where we set them initially with this, and then actually put that language back in and give the ability for the board to alter them at some later date. I don't know if we want to do that or not, but
I think that is a great question to talk through, or concept to talk through with our GovOps colleagues, because I believe when we're talking about chartering and legislative grants, the power here, it gets a little complicated. So if you are initially setting the boundaries, allowing some other body to adjust those boundaries comes with an analysis that it's not outside of my scope of practice. But I'm throwing that on there that it could get complicated. And so just again, repealing anything that's talking about the state board, listening to a request to adjust boundaries and making them. And then we have here the state board currently can't. We're saying the General Assembly may designate any school district as a supervisory district if it will provide for the education of all resident students in pre-K through 12 and is large enough to support the planning and administrative functions of the supervisory union. And then there's a whole host of current law that these asterisks represent that this draft does not propose to amend, but you will want to look at depending on other policy choices you make. And we're going to create a new subchapter regarding supervisory union membership. So supervisory union 1 shall be a supervisory district formed of school district 1. And then supervisory union 2 corresponds to school district 2 and is a supervisory district. Same for 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then when we get to supervisory union 7, supervisory union 7 shall be a supervisory union formed of the member school districts of 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. 8 is formed of the member school districts of 12, 13, 14, and 15. And 9 is formed of the member school districts 16, 17, 18, and 19. And I can see now that I should have put in the White River SU, Southwest SU, Northeast SU names, and I did not. So apologies for the confusion there. And then we're going to get into several pages of current law. So this is the tuitioning chapter. Chapter 21, maintenance of public schools. This is where the current law lives for the town tuition program. And you'll see that what occurs, the language between pages 21 and, avert your eyes. (37) is all current law that remains unchanged. And that was added to this draft, I believe, to again facilitate conversation around the tuitioning process. Happy to walk through that, talk about the tuition process. But for the purposes of this walkthrough, I'm going to jump to page 37, line 11, because there were amendments made to section 828. So we're still in the chapter 21 of Title 16, which is where all the tuitioning statutes live. This is section 828 is a small section, but it's a pretty powerful section because this is where we define who is eligible for accepting public tuition or not. Section 166, the approved independent school section, also has a whole host of requirements. But broadly speaking, when we're talking about where does it say that recognized independent schools don't get public tuition, this is the statute we're talking about. So a school district shall not pay the tuition of a student except to, so I'm going to read through the proposed amendments here. A public, I'm on page 37. A public school located in Vermont, an approved independent school that is located within the boundaries of a supervisory union with multiple member school districts, and at least 25% of the school's students were publicly tuitioned pursuant to this chapter on July 1, 2025, provided, however, that this subdivision shall not apply to a therapeutic approved independent school. So in order for a school district to pay tuition to an approved independent school, excluding the therapeutic schools, the approved independent school would need to meet these requirements.
So I didn't pick up on this yesterday when I looked at the draft. I actually intended that to be the 23-24 school year would be the
25%, okay.
Yeah. No, it wasn't the restriction goes to 51%. I think it's too high. So yes, Senator Reese and Senator King.
Can someone articulate why there's this, I guess, floor?
Yeah.
25%, 50%, whatever,
Yeah.
what's there for? What are we preventing? What's our concern?
Well, the theory here is it's with this bill, we are actually shrinking choice. We're shrinking the number of schools eligible to receive tuition. Because we're saying that if you're in one of the 6 large districts, you're no longer eligible because that it's not even though there is tuitioning in parts of those districts, of one of those districts in particular, the kids almost all go to public schools. They tuition into public schools. And so we're saying that the idea here is with these 3 SUs is that we're looking to have choice be available where it is a key part of the delivery system. And the administration's bill had to cut off at 51%. And I think that, my own opinion is that's too high. But that if the school has 25% of its kids were tuition at a 23 school year, they're integral delivery system. And so that's why. So there's two-part test. You have to be within the SUs, one of the 3 SUs, and you have to have had 25% of that's the rationale that we can have that.
So why couldn't it just remain as simple as you use the terms therapeutic approved independent schools? Why couldn't you just use the term independent schools, approved independent schools, in that instead of saying 25% or 50%?
You could. This bill is there is an element of trying to make this a realistic proposal given everything, and you can. The answer to your question is yes, you could. Policy reasons, there's a policy consideration to that. Yeah. So and consideration.
Thank you. I think, I mean, I know probably every other town is gonna have its own, weird questions to figure out how this all works, but there's one scenario I want to kind of game out a little bit just to figure out if I'm understanding how this would work in 828. So if we go back to the Reedsboro, Stanford area, and let's say they're going to a public school in Massachusetts, and 828 goes into effect, they'd be required to go to a public school in Vermont. They wouldn't be able to go to the public schools in the Southwest SU because they're technically in the Southeast SD. But then I also just saw on the next page on line 6 about the public school located in another state within 25 miles of Vermont. So that might be getting to what my question is.
Yeah.
But any clarification there?
The way this is drafted, and again, this represents total policy choices. The way this is drafted is that the students residing in Reedsboro and Stanford would have to attend a public school within their school district. Because they are not located in one of the SUs. They are located in a supervisory district. All of the supervisory districts are operating school districts.
So they would not be able to attend a public school that's just over the
Correct.
border.
Yeah, and I think
And I know
we
things have changed.
we need to fix that.
I'm just,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just trying to make a note of the things that may need to be changed.
You could also pay tuition to a tutorial program, an approved education program, an independent school in another state or country. Again, you'll notice that's current law. That is approved under the laws of that state or country. Draft would add that they would have to be located within 25 miles of the Vermont border. They currently have to meet the reporting requirements under subsection 4010C of Title 16, which is related to student weighting categories. And then again, this would not apply to therapeutic schools.
And I will say that the 25 miles is a placeholder for discussion. About how to do that. There is some consternation about, it's for the tuition districts being able to take the dollars and go to wherever.
Right.
And yet, we have to be careful about the fact that New Hampshire tuitions a lot of things back into us in particular. And so we have to be mindful of making sure that we strike the right balance. And so the 25 miles is a placeholder saying we have to figure this one out.
A school district could pay tuition to a public school located in another state or a therapeutic school located in another state or country that is approved under the laws of that state. And then the rest of this section remains.
Do we think it's important to keep other countries?
Oh, I didn't. No, probably not. No, if we're going within, yes.
I mean, like,
Well, Canada.
I thought about Canada,
Yeah.
but are we tuitioning a lot of students to
I don't
Canada right
know.
now?
It's a fair, check the box there and we'll figure that out. That's what we have to figure out. I think the answer is yes, that we do,
Okay,
but I can't.
right. I love Canada, not complaining about Canada, but I just didn't know if
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
if we say other country, maybe we can be more specific to Canada and not just any other country.
Or just 25 miles of the border.
25 miles
It's the Same thing.
Canada,
but we-
sure. Yeah.
But better weeks.
Yeah, thanks, sir. So I know this is like, we're going from 40,000 foot, but this counts maybe down in the trees. For a Vermont taxpayer, expat, stationed overseas, not necessarily, commercial, military, doesn't matter. Still paying taxes. You see no value of those taxes going into education. Why not allow its kids to recognize tuition assistance for tuition reimbursement? Something that kind of counters the question of whether you support international education or not. But there are some compelling reasons where families, they pay our taxes, but they're not being allowed.
Your point is people in the military.
No, commercial. Military is pretty much taking care of themselves.
Okay.
But I don't want to dive into it because it's way down in the weeds. I'm just going to make a note of it and we'll pop back.
Yeah.
Couple weeks.
That's fine.
And then there's a definition of therapeutic school provided here.
That's existing, all right. But
No, well, this does not exist in Title 16 right now. It does exist in the State Board of Education rules. The way we see this appear in Title 16 is instead of using therapeutic approved independent school, it just says an approved independent school, and then it repeats all of this language every time we talk about this concept. So now we can just use the term. But this is the definition from the State Board rules. The State Board rules do define it. And then, we're still in the same town tuition section. This is some language that when it was created was a carve out for the tuition chapter for these specific towns. And the school districts that make up these towns have all changed over the years. And so this is language that has long been needed to be cleaned up. But we're doing it here.
Yeah.
And then again, section 836 remains unchanged. And then that's it for the bill with a TBD effective date. That's gonna be a big piece of your policy is how do you build out your effective date section? I'll leave that there.
Huge TBD.
And any changes you see to the current law pieces of chapter 21, on these last, 20 or so pages are just drafting convention changes, right? Like you can see on page 40, there was a change made there on line 10 because our drafting convention says instead of writing out the word 10, we always put the numerals in there. So we tried to update that.
Yeah.
And that is the draft. Would you like me to continue sharing my screen in any particular point or stop sharing for discussion?
Maybe just leave it up. We'll leave it up in case somebody has a
Sure.
other additional questions.
Just, not a question, but more of a, suggestion regarding, getting some information from the joint fiscal office about, I know this is at the very early stages and changes are definitely going to be made, but, if essentially, from what I'm seeing, it just seems like the proposal is somewhat of a winnowing down of school choice. And there's always the debate about, public and private schools and the impact that it has on taxpayers. So, I'm sure it's not going to be this simple for a joint fiscal, but if there's any way of getting just a side-by-side comparison of, looking at this map compared to what we currently have, how much will this cost or how much will it save compared to what we have now in terms of cost versus savings with this system that we are making some tweaks to in terms of predominantly school choice, it seems.
Yeah, my sense is the answer is yes, but we should probably wait. Because I think we want to have a sense of how the financing would actually work. I have my own thoughts about tuition different than what's on this page that we can at some point get to. That I think actually decomplicates and might make the analysis easier, but that's for later.
Yeah.
But yeah, duly noted. Yeah, yes.
So there was a federal case about, funding following the child. Macon, is that gonna affect us at all?
I'm not sure that I know what you're talking about.
There was a federal case about the tuition funding following.
Carson versus me.
Well, yeah,
Oh, that's not what that case was about.
Yeah. that's it. Yeah, we'll get to, that's a different.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
I just want to make sure I understand. There's a lot, obviously, that's not in here about ratios or minimums or timelines or anything. You just want to have the conversation about district boundaries
well,
right now.
yeah, let me, and again, I said at the beginning, this is on one level a little bit out of order. Because tomorrow I actually have an outline that I just started, we can pass out in a minute, and it's gonna post it for discussion. To sort of try to organize the discussion. I thought we could make this a little bit of time when after we're done with this, just to look at the outline and think about, get ahead of a little bit of tomorrow and make sure the outline makes sense to people. And what am I missing? Because, so,
It's up online, just waiting for the.
okay.
While we're just talking about the maps, I know it might sound kind of nitpicky right now, but I propose, at least in certain places where there's small boundaries make a big difference to folks. Maybe they do everywhere, but we just number the districts rather than try to give them names, because the names I think are going to be distracting for people in my area who the names have been important to their identity for a long time, and there's one that's 3 counties that's called Chittenden Central, and
Right.
I'm not gonna hear the end of that.
Okay, fair, definitely fair enough.
Okay, so maybe they should be numbered right now.
The only reason I think, well, what we help was it does help you put, figure out where it is on the map.
Right.
So, well, go ahead and pass them out. I want to make sure we're done first. Any other questions for Beth?
I should just note that, in the tuitioning sections that are all, avert your eyes, that are all current law, there are 2 placeholders here, they're highlighted, if I can find them, that are meant to spur some thought. So there are 2 sections, elementary tuition and then section 824 is high school tuition. And I'm on page 30. Line 1. Currently, tuition is set in different ways. For public schools, it's the full tuition charged by that public school. And for approved independent schools, it can be several different things, but most usually what we are referring to is the average announced tuition. I've put in here just kind of a question of how you are setting tuition. If you're going to keep the tuition construct, how are you setting tuition? Is that the weighted foundation amount for each individual student instead of some average announced tuition? Again, this is just to generate conversation. So I just wanted to point that out.
And that, like, I read that, we talked about it, and it's, that's going to be a discussion we need to have soon. And you had it in someplace else, you said.
Yep, in the corresponding high school one.
Okay. Yeah, same thing.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
When we do the districts and what happens when you may have a student, that it's better for them to go into the other district just out of sheer being closer?
Yeah, like Red Cross, there's provision now, am I right? That allows that to happen.
Yes, the provision in current law is that, let's see. What's this? High school choice. So this is the high school. This is section 822. This is the section that requires a school district to maintain a high school or pay tuition. And there is a provision in current law that says the school district may both maintain a high school. I am on page 23, line 15. A school district may both maintain a high school and furnish high school education by paying tuition to a public school, as in the judgment of the school board may best serve the interests of the students, or approved independent school. If the school board judges that a student has unique educational needs that cannot be served within the district or at a nearby public school, and then the judgment of the school board is final. So it's school board discretion. So if the school board disagrees with what's best for the student, that's it.
And we could change that line.
You can change anything.
That's fair. It's a fair point. If it's what, if you have to do, if you live here, school right here, but just across the line, and you got to go. You got a fair point. Have the discussion. Yes.
Naming convention. Looking at the map, I understand the construct, but there are 9 large groups. Okay. Some of which we call districts and some of which we call unions. And then underneath underneath the unions, the supervisory unions, we have districts. I think the naming convention is going to be a little hard for folks. It's a speed bump. And I'm wondering why not 9 SUs, 3 of those SUs have districts.
That is how it is.
No, it's not.
Yes.
Right here on the map, it says Northern SD
Well, that
district.
Yeah, that was me. This is bad.
Oh,
In the draft, remember, and I can get this out if we all need a reminder. Supervisory unions, supervisory districts are supervisory unions. It is just that a supervisory district only has one school district that it is responsible for.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I have wondered about the same possible confusion, because the 6 districts have 2 functions in a way. Or because they're also the SU. I have sometimes, speaking shorthand, talked about the districts under the SUs as sub-districts, which is, I know, not the right language to use, but I have done that because they're different than that, on one level, different than the larger districts. So I don't know. But
we can name them.
Come up with one we can, like,
Yeah.
Like, no, it's like saying, okay, look, we have 50 states, but some of those states aren't really states, they're counties because they're smaller. You know, and it's like, why use the same words to describe?
We have
similar-
territories.
Well, yeah.
I will just say, if you allow me, you're right. We can absolutely change those names, but then you would need to come up with a corresponding definition, right? So, the reason we kept the current language is I didn't have enough direction to create new concepts, right? So it's not just, I'm thinking of, it's not just names, it's actual entities that you would need to define, but you were absolutely right. This is all policy.
How, I mean, I saw an exchange with, I think, Michael Morgan about the islands and how they function. Do you want major feedback today or
that's
Well,
tradition.
here's one thought that I had.
either way? But
Is that maybe later this week, let's say Friday, we begin to get senators in here,
okay,
not for any dispositive statements, but just saying, yeah, this generally makes sense, let me go check. Or I think this one should be divided in half, or maybe we get some beginnings. We have to figure out, and Senator Sheen raised this beginning of getting superintendents and others. We have to, but begin to figure out how to test the, the boundaries, which the best I could do to get something started, but test them. And that's obviously something we're gonna have to do, and that has to actually meet the ground and with this Senator Sheen said, the superintendent's notes. So, but maybe we'll just go that and then see where we are and regroup and figure out the board from there. Any other- By the way, we're gonna get plenty of shots.
I think another thing to add to all of this is the discussion of sharing services across borders, across SU or SD borders. I know that's what we were getting at with BOCES, and it's what the administration's proposal was in part getting at with the just 5 districts, is that it's easier to access services that might exist 45 minutes or an hour away. So I think perhaps adding that to the list of many things we have to consider would be helpful.
So one of the things we do is we'll start penciling those things in. That we. So,
CTEs, so
yeah, I think. Did I mention that here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the CTEs will do, and in fact, just to note, Beth will be back on Thursday to just talk about the current 3 models of CTE governance. So get us grounded in that, and that will help inform that discussion.
I'm not trying to create more work for your son. I really hope someone can do this for us. It would be helpful to look at, to have on hand maps of current conditions. So for example, a map, I can list the ones I like, but I would like one by county with all of the students, the ADM in each county, to have on hand. I'd like,
Do you mean county, do you mean?
Or district.
I mean county,
County.
because if we're upending the whole thing, I still want to know how many students are in the Northeast Kingdom, in the 3 counties, you know? So I think I would like to know by county, the student membership. And then I would like to I don't know, maybe I missed it, but I would like to have a map of the current districts. Yes, maybe a bigger one.
Yeah,
Districts, SUs, and CTE centers.
yeah. So with the CTE centers.
Dotted off. Yeah,
I think that exists, but.
it's better,
Yeah,
right? I mean, like if GIS has it, I don't know.
Follow up on Senator Ron Hinsdale's comment. As we produce, this, I'm considering this map 2, map 1 was from the governor. It would be helpful, the CTE centers are not gonna move. They are where they are. If those could be plotted on these maps as they migrate through time, that would be helpful because it's a big driver in this.
So we just make them permanent.
Yeah, just make it permanent.
And
It's not going
as we, yeah. So,
Schoolhouses are too. I think they are where they are. But I don't, might be helpful to be shown where they are within districts.
I'm about to send you all something that I think you'll love.
I love data.
We love.
I'm gonna send it and then if you'd like me to, I can share my screen and show you.
Yep.
Okay. I can't make this bigger without nothing stuff up. So House Education worked with, I don't remember the name of the office. I think it's the VCGI, Vermont.
I call them GIS.
Okay, GIS, yes.
Yeah. Or geography people.
Yes, to create this map, and I am not an expert on how to use it. I've sent you all a link. But I can connect you with folks who use it, who know how to use it better than me. But there's all kinds of filters on here. And all of these dots are representing school buildings. And what I personally think is pretty cool is that some of the data you will receive includes PCB scores, condition facility indexes, enrollment data, et cetera. So, and my understanding is that this is still a work in progress, and so it may not be perfect. There you
That's
go.
gonna be helpful.
Can we have them in if they are also taking suggestions for how to make it more useful for us?
who's they?
GIS.
Oh, yeah.
John
Yeah.
Adams.
Yeah.
Something like that, something presidential.
Yeah.
They might, I mean, when we've done housing work in the past, they show us data we didn't even know we needed to see, like the transportation and commute patterns in the state and things like that. They're just really helpful to visualize the state in different ways.
And those patterns matter.
Yeah.
Prediction patterns, others matter. So, for instance, something that Senator Westman has raised that we need to pay attention to.
Right.
This area. So I want to get him in here, talk about that. Okay. Anything else for Beth today? And we will, thank you for this.
Have a great app.
And we'll see you on Thursday.
Do you need anything from me related to, I'll make that change related to the school year tied to the 25%. Is there anything else?
Maybe, if you are free tomorrow, either watch or come over as we have the discussion, because it might, we might end up, or if you're busy, that's okay, we can talk afterwards.
I will join you when I can.
So Beth, you kind of led your conversation, whatever it was, 40 minutes ago or so, by saying that there are other areas of 16 VSA that need change, and that you were happy to provide a list. That list would be helpful to kind of get our head around
Oh,
other topics that we need to prioritize and
I-
address.
I hear you, and I would say I am not able to produce a list right now because it depends on your policy choices. What would need to change?
Good.
I think, thinking about, so for example, what I walked you all through last week, chapter 11 related to union school district governance. I think there are a lot of concepts in there you will probably end up borrowing from on how these larger consolidated school districts run themselves. But that language is probably going to need to be modified for these larger school districts and then plunked in with your larger school districts, and that whole chapter would be repealed. You know, if you keep the supervisory, if you were to change the name of supervisory union to something else, a supervisory district, right? I'd have to make conforming amendments throughout all of Title 16 to make those changes align. Pretty much any, I haven't heard any requests about special education. But pretty much everywhere in Title 16 is fair game for conforming amendments or substantive amendments, depending on the policy changes you make.
Is this for today?
Yeah, I thought we could at least look at, is that a good way to organize the discussion? for
Okay.
tomorrow? I just sat at the computer and banged this out.
Oh, okay.
That's all it
This
is.
isn't like a bad
No,
suggestion.
this is not just me sitting at the computer this weekend, just trying to figure out how do we organize and keep putting one foot in front of the other. And
Brainstorming.
You want me to stay for this discussion? You have me booked until 3:30,
you are
so.
always welcome to stay. We always like it when you're here.
You want me to stay in this seat or have a seat in the audience?
You sit there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you, I mean, I always worry about what's not on the list.
Yeah.
Does that not get discussed this year, or
Oh, wait, no, this, I'm
this is for tomorrow?
this is the first cut I had at thinking about some big questions we need to answer. I probably hit 5% of them. There's a lot of other, but I'm also trying to keep us
Yeah,
grounded at what we need to do first
okay,
and not get down. Oh, however, as you think of things, just write them down. And then maybe on the back page, you know, depending on what order, you know, where they fall in the construct.
Okay.
I guess one question we would I might ask is this, you know, on the first few, the right first few questions. And what are our goals? So certainly I would say, and by the way, this is not a place where that I was thinking about, that didn't mean anything other than, what we quickly get to, you know, optimum district size, thinking about the 6 especially, board size, I threw in 9 just for the sake of having a number, you know, election cycle. And then, you know, I think a huge discussion is in 2, C and D. For us to have. So we can either, you know, just take this with us and mark it and think about it tonight and make your own marks and we talk about it tomorrow, or if people have some obvious things that they want to throw in now, we can do that.
We heard about that last night. Sleep, all right. That was a hot blood issue.
Yes.
I'd also like to get to the question of the state board of education.
Yep.
And probably adding that in number 2. I think that
yeah.
that's something that we have to
I
revisit.
think maybe under governance. Because AOE versus state board.
Yeah.
So then,
That's it.
I would also want, I mean, I brought this up at the very beginning, I think, for optimum school size or class size. That's something that I really think should be left to the discretion of people who have an in-depth knowledge of the science of, what's a good class size, because I don't think, respectfully to all of us, I don't think any of us really knows, the impact on a teacher in a school of, a classroom of 10 kids in, Stanford versus a classroom of 10 kids in Burlington, and or a classroom of 20 or 30 kids. So I think I just worry about us non-educational professionals getting too in the weeds on something that should be left to professionals who have significant knowledge about it. So it's my 2 cents on it.
And I was, so I put the note in there, do we want to be pursued or not?
Yeah.
I had my own thought, but
The problem you run into there is just what we've already run in that as testimony. You have one section says, hey, this is the ideal, and then the next one comes in and says, no, they're wrong. This is the idea. So it's kind of very tricky.
Yeah. I
think if we do a max and then leave it up to school's decision, we got a long ways to go.
Or perhaps, leaving it up. Yeah, I guess, basically, kind of get to what you're saying, creating a general guideline, but if there's an exception for whatever reason, the school board can, vote, yeah, we only want to have 8 kids in this classroom, and we're making that decision, with an understanding of why.
yeah, I mean, the other way to do it, or one other way to do it is to, if we think about the foundation formula as effectively being a per pupil block grant, weight per pupil block grant. They get the money for an efficient district and spend it how we want it. And I will say for what's worth, if we're having this discussion now a little bit, I'm not inclined to be. But it's a question we have to. I like the idea of one district does it one way and one does it another. But as long as in the end we'll have to have another discussion. What was the cost of that? Stay with that district. But in terms of the block that coming in, my own reasons for one secretary, I tend to think not we've not been different. I mean, not.
I just have 2 meta thoughts. So one, I think timeline is like beginning, middle, end of this conversation. Just anything is possible over time, but I think there, in my estimation, there was too much in the proposal we heard that was unspoken about the timeline. That really concerned me, that we have to be really explicit and enumerate all the pieces of the timeline that have to make sense.
Yeah.
And I'm still frankly concerned that I don't know if we're done looking at their plan, but that it's still not clear to me what comes first or second, and if we make all of that up, or if there's like a best practice for how we sequence this, that we
Certainly timeline we need to have one.
Right.
And for, again, the way I'm thinking about
Mhm.
this, as one says, is that we kind of look at where we want to end up
yes,
and then back down through the timeline.
Right.
We're thinking about everything at once.
Right.
Yeah. But I think we figure out where we're trying to go
right.
and then figure out what are the steps for getting there once we have.
That leads to my second meta issue to raise, which is finance often ends up driving the education conversation. And I think I'm glad finance is on here. I think we really need to get to that and say, what would we envision as financing proposals that help us meet our goals.
Totally agree. I even had my own beginnings of a construct over there, but.
Agreed, you did want to get that rid of her time.
To not,
Yeah,
and
that's where I tend to live, having been on ways of
so
finance.
we could, depending on how we do with 1, 2, and 3, and whatever else we add to it, we could move to, thinking about that question. Either later this week or next week, or we'll probably have thoughts about how to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's a great discussion.
I still see like physical plant as such an important part of,
This existing physical plant is one.
yeah, so I have like a whole some categories within under school finance. And I don't know if like, this isn't my call, but I have lived a long time in discussions about what's funded by the general fund, what's funded by the education fund, what goes into all of those funds. I think even if it happens outside of committee, people need to be very fluent in that to have an influence on the financing conversation when it gets to finance appropriation.
Good point. Last night, we had a long conversation with a school board, parents associated with the school board about the proper funding mechanism for mental health, kids' mental health, and where that falls. When we start talking about finance, we need to put that in the right cap.
Yeah.
And then everybody agree, we walk and be able to support to our constituents why it's in one budget or another. And hold that
It
conversation.
has to be a deliberate part of the conversation.
Right, that's my point. I think it belongs under finance. It's a finance issue.
And, along those lines, we also have maybe it's concomitant, I'm not sure, but similar issue. The amazing work that how much effort schools are putting in, often on an ad hoc basis, but in a very substantial way, helping kids and families who are underprivileged and all the things that come with that. And there's a lot of dollars involved in that. And so it's all not the same thing, but it's similar and probably needs to be part of the same part. We think about that as well, because it's a huge part of us schools. And
I'll also just say, which is a finance and government operations and institutions question. If I'll just throw this out there because I don't know another way to say it, but eventually what I see is that people would vote on a budget that relates to the operations and physical plant in their district, while acknowledging that the amount of money per student is already baked into the foundation formula. So I think the question lies with the committee and then other committees. Are people going to vote on a school budget? And what is that going to entail? What is actually up for negotiation and discussion, which relates to physical plant and all kinds of things. But I just think we have to ultimately still have a local control component that helps people feel like part of unifying decisions in their district.
yeah. So there's a lot of discussion to be had there. One construct is that if the block grant of foundation health block grant is high enough, you theoretically might even have to have a vote. But you're saying you may want to anyway, for instance,
I'm saying you may want to separate out the pieces where people believe there should be ongoing efficiencies versus the pieces that follow the student and are kind of, in my mind, a separate bucket. Beth has heard me try to figure this piece out, but people want to continue to see accountability for physical plant and administrative costs. I don't think, and then we hear from superintendents and others, if they have to make decisions between physical plant and teachers, that makes it a very hard conversation for anyone to really engage in a fair way, that those two should probably be separate. I'm just gonna
Well,
lay my.
I know it's not what you're saying, but it also
Yeah.
raises the school construction and aid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That'd be something we.
Right. Because people will want to say, and like, where are we building the regional high school? What does it look like? How much does it cost?
But I wanna make sure that we're not building our house on a crooked foundation either. One of the issues last night was, still got PCB problems out there. We still have a moratorium on school construction. So are we gonna make assumptions that that's all gonna get fixed as we build this perfect plan?
I think we have to have those discussions, and I think, school construction aid and how schools then. Okay, yeah. But,
Back to Senator Hinsdale's point about local control. So I think somewhere in here, we need to have a conversation about the local advisory committees.
Oh, yeah.
And then we also need then to, have another committee weigh in, whether it's GovOps or whomever, about, just to kind of counterbalance our views of the local control issue and its relationship to local advisory committees. It's a pretty key topic. I mean, how much local control is remaining at the end of this product?
well, what it's more tiny element of that is the reason I moved from 5 to 9 board members was to have a little bit more direct influence in it. So that's not anywhere near a full answer. It's a little tiny bit of the answer.
I've asked you this question before, and I think that we should have what our goal is for this session. So we can tell our voters, because we know this isn't going to be a one session fix, but like if we have our governance down, I think that is the main goal, correct?
For what I've been saying, I said the forum in Arlington on Sunday. I got asked that those questions, and I said, it may be that what we do is develop the governance construct or framework to a certain point, certainly district boundaries, and then setting the process in place for figuring out the wars and figure out the structure for the financing piece. And they both sort of, have all kinds of things to be filled in underneath over the summer, fall, and into the next year. But maybe, getting those, I think if we got those two pieces somehow in place, and when I had used the term, what is the term I used? Not foundation. Beginnings of the structure for governance anyway. The framework, that word, framework. Then a question of what does framework mean? But that's what I think we're trying to get to as far as we can down that tree.
I'm going to ask this as a new person. Can that, like, if we get it, committee comes up with the governance after we balance it out, is that something we can send in as a bill to get voted on so it can start being worked on, or does it just exist in?
I don't know the answer to that. We'll have to see as we get closer, but I think we should be, maybe the way for us to think is that we're trying to get ready for something that we can pass with all kinds of things that have to happen before it becomes operationalized. But we get the framework. So I think we should maybe be headed for that, and then we'll see where we are as we get at what we do.
Is your goal tomorrow also to talk about who we need to hear from? Okay, because I had to start that conversation.
I think Senator Heffernan's point is pretty good that in the timeline, we need to decide what we're going to try to accomplish this session.
That's right.
Summer, fall, if there's a committee thing going, next session, et cetera. That's all part of it. And then you've got to create our own self-imposed milestones and
It will make our constituents very happy.
Yeah.
That we can say this, we have direction.
Yeah, have direction. I'm also saying we're moving very carefully.
And emphasize that a lot.
Yeah, and we'll be try to put 1 foot in front of the other, being careful.
It's a DOD thing.
So, anything else for today?
I just, while we're all amplifying each other's points or whatever, I think the AOE Board of Education conversation is a very important one too. I mean, we are less qualified than the people who are involved in those systems to make and implement big education policy decisions. So I'm seeing this as partially our role, but knowing how we hand that work over to the right stakeholders is important.
Well, I mean, it's also true. We do that all. We do legislation all the time where we educate ourselves and then make policy decisions. Having said that, this is a discussion. I had been thinking that about the state board and AOE that could wait a little while. It's not directly related to the maps and that part of the governance structure. So rather than if I would just throw out there that maybe we can hold off on that one for a little while because we can make progress down the tree without having to get to that for a little while.
I would highly recommend we keep it on the list though. And then we see we've got an opening on a particular day, in the next week, and we target it because there is tension between AOE and the State Board of Education. Obviously,
Right.
we need to begin to address
Right.
it.
I think, what you're saying, we educate ourselves and we make decisions. I usually feel confident that I know who is going to implement what we're doing and how that structure functions. I have pretty deep concerns that distract me from all of this about how much is functioning right now and how poorly resourced the Board of Education is to do its work. This power struggle about who does what, things we are hearing about the agency not fully seeing its current commitments through, like that. I don't go and hear that about ACCD and then write housing policy, and if I have that concern, it influences how I write a policy, if that makes sense.
Maybe we should also be thinking about this, or another way, or very possible way to think about this is to just, as we do the work, think about which entity should do what, and not get ourselves into when you talk about power struggle. I'm not sure that's what's going on, but it might be. But let's say maybe we don't even think about it that way. We just think about where should, as we go through and things happen, where somebody has to be in a decision, make them and sort of analyze who it should be.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right.
also.
And David can attest to this. In economic development, DEPSI might come in and say, that's not what we do, and we can't do it that way. And that changes how we write a bill. So I just don't even know how to ask that question of a system where people are not telling us clearly what the lines of command are.
It may be that as we work down this,
Mhm.
and begin some of that, at least where we need to have that discussion will become clear.
That'd be good. That would be nice.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a report about how other states do this, like how much the Board of Education, like how the Board of Education functions vis-a-vis, other parts of state government.
We
I
did,
don't know.
we took some testimony on that. There was some testimony about, and it was quick, it was in the middle of something else, but there was a slide, as I recall, about how many how different states treat the authority of the board.
Mhm.
We saw a slide.
Yes. Yes,
So maybe we go back and find that and then.
yes,
think about
if
how we
that's
get
why
there.
it could
Yeah.
become like
Yeah.
a few pages of information. That would be helpful, because. Yeah, I don't think what we're doing. I was there when we made the governance changes, and I don't feel good about it, frankly, anymore. And I had no contact with other states that if that, what we did made any sense, and I'm starting to
So
believe
by
that it didn't.
46.
I feel like it was before Act 46 that we gave the governor the ability to appoint the Secretary of Education. I think that was a precursor to Act 46.
Oh.
I think it was 2 years before.
2012.
And Act 46 was a few years, 2015. Yeah. Yeah, I was there. Don't feel good about it. Just say that.
Well, so let's just want to take this with you, make notes, and let's start to delve down in. We can, some of the discussion will be about who we need to hear from. Some of it will be maybe we're clear in our own minds about some of this already. The prescriptive versus non-prescriptive, for instance. And talk tomorrow.
This is good though. I know what it's like to be a chair and have to put something out for people to poke holes in and respond to. And I appreciate that that's what you're doing. It's not easy in this subject area either.
Yeah, hopefully, we have this, then we good about for draft 2 point whatever it is, and we keep building. And I'm really looking forward to the finance discussion too. So
And I have been telling people this to the best of my knowledge, but we are currently not operating on some kind of legislative schedule under normal rules.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that missed anything.
Good for today. All right, thank you, Ben. We can go